October 15th, 1944. 02:11 hours. 30 feet above the Rhine floodplain, west of Cologne. The darkness was thick. So thick it felt alive, shifting in the slipstream, swirling beneath the twin Merlin 72 engines of a Mosquito B-Make 9 as it tore across Germany at a speed no bomber had any right to reach. The altimeter barely cleared the numbers beyond zero. Frost coated the canopy edges, and the blur of river reflections smeared across the glass like streaks of mercury. Inside the cockpit, Flight Lieutenant Arthur Keane, 27, London-born, the son of a railway worker, kept his gloved hands tight on the yoke. Beside him, in the narrow navigation seat, Flight Officer Daniel Mercer, 24 from Portsmouth, hunched over his maps and stopwatch, marking every second in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Both knew this flight, this unbelievably low, unbelievably fast run, was the kind of mission that didn't give second chances. Wind hammered the Mosquito's wooden frame, yet the aircraft never shuddered. It sliced the night like a living arrow. Far behind them, still warming on fog-coated runways in the Ruhr, Luftwaffe pilots joked about these plywood pests. Der Holzvogel, the wooden bird. Lightweight, fragile, laughable. Easy prey if you could catch one. Tonight, Cologne's defenses were prepared, or so they believed. Ahead, the moon broke through a slit in the clouds, illuminating the city's jagged silhouette. The cathedral towers, the black cubes of factories, the anti-aircraft batteries already turning upward. Keane felt the tension coil in his gut. He had flown 35 combat missions, but nothing like this. Tonight wasn't about altitude or evasive spirals. Tonight was about pure speed and nerve. He pushed the throttle forward. The Merlins roared, the RPM surged, and the Mosquito leapt ahead, accelerating past 360 mph. A rooftop-level sprint so fast the terrain blurred into a single smearing ribbon of gray. Mercer whispered, 3 minutes to target. Keep her level. Keane didn't answer. His focus tunneled into the thin horizon line, into the faint outline of the spires that rose like spears against the moonlit haze. Below him, chimneys passed so close he could see soot peeling off brick. In the German radar stations around Cologne, operators were already shouting. Tracks flickered, then vanished. The Mosquito's laminated wooden skin and absurdly low altitude bent the returns into ghost images, false echoes, misreads. One operator said the aircraft was at 4,000 feet. Another said 400. A third insisted the machine didn't exist at all. And in the command room, a senior Luftwaffe controller barked, "Scramble! Fighters up! Now! Intercept before they reach the river!" But the order came too late. The Mosquito flight, 4 aircraft, spaced so widely they seemed like streaks of moonlight, was already slipping under the searchlight cones, already threading into the twisting maze of rooftops, already minutes ahead of the German clocks. Keane felt the heat of Cologne's industrial district rising as they skimmed over it. But he held the line, refusing to climb. The nose vibrated, the engines howled, and the city's massive cathedral flashed past them like a black monolith. Mercer called out, "Turn point approaching, 10 seconds." Keane's jaw clenched, his muscles tightened, his heartbeat pounded in his ears. The strike was about to begin. Somewhere behind them, the first German interceptor engines sputtered to life. Me-109s and Ju-88 night fighters struggling to claw into the sky. But they would rise into empty air. Because by the time those fighters reached altitude, the Mosquitoes would already have hit their target and vanished back into the dark. A mission so fast, German records later showed fighters arriving 90 seconds after the last Mosquito had left Cologne entirely. Keane dipped a wing, preparing for the final run. The city exhaled smoke and fire beneath him. The attack was moments away. 02:14 hours. Cologne's western industrial quarter. Altitude, 40 feet. Speed, 365 mph. The Mosquito leveled out over a blur of corrugated rooftops and tram lines, racing so low that sparks occasionally spat from telephone wires stirred by the slipstream. As Keane eased the yoke left, the aircraft carved between two 10-story warehouse blocks so narrow, Mercer instinctively ducked, as though lowering his head could somehow make the airframe thinner. Keane didn't see the buildings. He felt them. The pressure change, the air funnel, the slight rise in temperature as they skimmed over a boiler house. At this altitude, his senses became the aircraft's senses, and his hands moved as much on instinct as training. Behind the lead Mosquito, the other three followed in staggered intervals, each crew fighting their own private battle with speed, fear, and the razor-thin margin for error. Then the first German searchlight snapped upward. A single white beam slashed the night, sweeping across blocks of factories, then snapped onto the lead Mosquito's tail like a predator locking onto prey. Mercer hissed, "Searchlight on us, bearing 240." Almost immediately, the light fractured into a dozen more, blooming open like white flowers, each cutting through the darkness from a different tower, a different flak pit, a different rooftop. The beams converged, hunting, guessing, overshooting, until one caught the Mosquito full on the belly, bleeding silver across the fuselage. Keane didn't blink. He rolled left, almost knife edge, pushing the aircraft into the shadow of a steelworks crane. The searchlight lost them for half a second, just enough. "Hold on," Keane barked. He dropped the nose. The Mosquito plunged, engines screaming, leveling barely 20 feet above a line of rail cars. The slipstream blasted coal dust into swirling corkscrews behind them. Above, flak cannons erupted, their muzzle flashes lighting the bottoms of the clouds. The first shells burst hundreds of meters too high. Radar had no idea where the aircraft truly were. German gunners cursed into their headsets. The Mosquito was below their instruments' awareness, below their expectations, below their nightmares. The wooden bomber sprinted straight toward the Hohenzollern Bridge, its iron lattice rising like a rib cage from the Rhine, glowing faint gold in the searchlight chaos. Bridges were death traps for low-level flyers. Pillars narrowed the approach, flak nests lined the sides, and crosswinds funneled unpredictably through the arches. Mercer checked his stopwatch. 30 seconds. Keane pulled a breath through his mask. "Prepare to arm." Mercer's hands trembled as he flipped the switches, one after another, until the bombs beneath their wings hummed alive. But the Luftwaffe wasn't finished yet. Out of the eastern sky, a pair of Ju-88 G1 night fighters screamed in on an intercept vector. Too high, too wide, but diving fast, hoping to catch something, anything, in their radar cone. Their radar flashed contacts, but couldn't track them. Altitude errors, speed errors, phantom blips. The Mosquitoes were moving too fast for the system to compute. One Ju-88 pilot shouted, "Where are they? They should be right below." But below him was only the black Rhine and a faint, rapidly disappearing silver streak. Back at rooftop height, Keane committed to the bombing run. They flashed past a smokestack so close the wingtip vortices churned smoke into spirals. Turbulence hammered the wooden wings. The temperature in the cockpit climbed from engine bleed air and the friction of raw speed. Mercer braced both boots against the floor. "This is it." 20 seconds. Below, German soldiers sprinted across the bridge walkway, pointing skyward, shouting warnings lost in the thunder of engines. Above them, the Mosquito dropped into perfect alignment with the bridge's center span. Keane tightened his grip. This was the moment that separated legends from wreckage. He steadied the bomber. The bombs waited. Cologne burned beneath them. 02:15 hours. The Hohenzollern Bridge. Target window, 6 seconds. The Mosquito shot forward like a silver dart, streaking just above the Rhine. The bridge's iron arches rose overhead, black and skeletal against the burning glow of nearby factories. Every second tightened the funnel of danger. Crosswinds struck between the arches, the air thickened with drifting smoke, and the river's cold reflection shimmered upward like an oil-black mirror. Mercer leaned over the bomb site, his voice tight. Steady, steady. Keep her at 45 feet. Keane's eyes didn't blink. Locked. The world narrowed into a tunnel, the arches, the trusses, the target span. Even the engine noise seemed to grow distant as the cockpit filled with the pulse of their synchronized breathing. For a moment, there was only speed, purpose, and the faint tremor of the Mosquito's wooden frame as she knifed through the humid air. Then the first burst of flak erupted from the riverbank. A geyser of shrapnel detonated 50 feet to port. The blast wave slammed the fuselage sideways, rattling the spars and jolting the instruments. But Keane corrected instantly, dipping the right wing just enough to slip between two converging searchlight beams. Mercer shouted, "Ignore them! On target in 5! Above the bridge, German gunners pivoted wildly, trying to predict the Mosquito's next move. But the bomber was too fast, its low approach assaulting senses they'd trained for high-altitude threats. Their aim lagged seconds behind reality, an eternity at 360 mph. 4. Keane skimmed over the outer arch, so low he heard the whistle of disturbed air bouncing off rivets. 3. A flak battery fired point-blank from the bridge's eastern tower, the tracer stream ripping past the canopy like glowing orange needles. 2. Keane held the yoke firm. No evasive action, not yet. 1. Release! Mercer toggled the switch. A jolt ran through the Mosquito's belly as two 500-pound bombs dropped clean, the sudden loss of weight nudging the nose upward. The bombs arced forward, vanishing beneath the bridge shadows just as Keane shoved the throttle wide open. Climb, now! The Mosquito lunged upward, straight into a crosswind gust that threatened to roll it onto its side. Keane fought the pressure, banking hard left, scraping past the next arch with inches to spare. The bomber burst from the bridge's far side like a shell from a cannon. Then, 3 seconds later, the bomb struck. A double flash bloomed beneath the bridge span. Steel buckled. The center walkway erupted into fire, and the blast rolled across the river like a shockwave of molten air. The Mosquito shook violently, even at full throttle escape. Keane gritted his teeth. Bridge hit confirmed? Mercer watched the bloom of fire expand behind them. Oh, it's confirmed. But Cologne wasn't done. The city erupted in every direction, searchlights sweeping, sirens howling, flak clouds forming in spirals. The German night fighter station issued frantic orders. Vector all aircraft. The Mosquitoes are turning south. Cut them off. But that assumption was wrong. The Mosquitoes weren't turning. They were fleeing straight east, punching through factory corridors and rail yards in a line no German controller expected. A pair of Mi-109 G6s dove in from 5,000 feet, streaking downward on an intercept vector. The German flight leader squinted through his canopy. They're low. Too low. But before they could complete the dive, the lead Mosquito was already half a mile ahead, the engine glow shrinking into a silver speck against the burning skyline. Keane checked his airspeed, 372 mph. Faster than any fighter now climbing after them, Mercer. whispered, half in awe, half in disbelief. "They can't catch us. They actually can't catch us." Behind them, Cologne's defenders kept firing into empty air, chasing ghosts. The Mosquito had become exactly what the Luftwaffe always feared. A phantom that appeared without warning, struck at impossible speed, and vanished before radar even found its altitude. But the escape was not over. Ahead lay the most dangerous part of the mission, the sprint through Cologne's eastern suburbs. Tight streets, rising factory blocks, and dozens of flak towers waiting to tear the wooden bomber apart. Keane lowered the nose. The Mosquito dipped back toward the rooftops, and the chase began again. 02:17 hours. Cologne's eastern district. Altitude 25 to 30 feet. Speed 368 to 374 mph. The Mosquito plunged back into the maze of Cologne's eastern blocks, the terrain rising and falling in jittering silhouettes as Keane threaded the aircraft between chimneys, tram cables, and abandoned factory cranes. The bomber wasn't flying over Cologne anymore. It was flying inside it. Every rooftop became part of the horizon. Every alleyway felt like a tunnel. Every shadow seemed a potential flak position. Mercer wiped sweat from his brow despite the cold air blasting through the cockpit vents. 2 minutes until we clear the city. Keane didn't look away from the windscreen. That's 2 minutes too long in this place. Behind them, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Mosquitoes fought their own duels with the city's geometry. One skimmed beneath a railway semaphore arm so close that its antenna snapped off in the slipstream. Another clipped a rooftop tile that spiraled into the darkness like shrapnel. But the formation held, thin, scattered, but still intact. Then the first flak tower opened fire. A concrete fortress on the district's northern edge erupted in orange flame, sending a rippling line of tracer fire across the rooftops. The tracers arced downward, their angles wrong for a rooftop chase. They overshot and undershot, unable to follow the insane zigzag path Keane had chosen. Mercer glanced back. They're shooting blind. They'll get lucky if we give them the chance. Keane hauled the Mosquito into a shallow right turn, slicing between two factory chimneys, spaced barely wider than the wingspan. The starboard wingtip missed a brick column by less than a meter. So close that the suction of the passing wing tore a sheet of paper from a rooftop clothesline and carried it spinning into the night. But not everything was misaligned. High above, the Luftwaffe fighters were finally arriving. Two Bf 109 G-14s, climbing hard on emergency power, banked into a steep dive to cut off the Mosquitoes before they cleared the city. Their engines wailed as they plunged through pockets of turbulence. Below them, the wooden streaks of the RAF bombers skittered through the industrial shadows like maddened insects. The German squadron leader, Lieutenant Karl Voss, clenched his jaw. Speed increasing. 320. 340. We'll catch them in the open. But they wouldn't. Keane's Mosquito slid beneath a row of street lamps, then surged upward to cross a viaduct at the last possible instant. The 109s dove after them, but overshot, their angle too steep, their speed too slow to match the rocket-like escape below. They screamed past, unable to descend sharply enough without risking collision with the rising cityscape. Voss cursed, yanking his control stick to avoid smashing into a water tower whose steel legs seemed to rise from nowhere. Verdammt! They're too low. Down below, Keane felt the rumble of another flak burst. This one close enough to punch a handful of shrapnel holes in the starboard wing. The Mosquito lurched, its wooden skin flexing with a groan. Mercer shouted, "We took hits. Nothing critical. Stay on course." Keane swallowed hard. He couldn't climb. He couldn't slow. He couldn't even breathe wrong. Every decision now was razor-thin life or death. He shoved the throttle forward again. The Merlin 72s responded with a roar that vibrated through the cockpit floorboards, pushing them past 375 miles, then 380 mph, the boss of the fastest low-level sprint Keane had ever attempted in combat. Ahead, the final obstacle rose, a massive freight depot with rail lines branching into a chaotic web of steel. Sheds, gantries, cranes, and stacked cargo created a labyrinth with no clean way through. Mercer's voice cracked. "Arthur, there's no path." Keane stared ahead. "There is. Hold tight." He dipped the nose slightly, lining up with a narrow service alley between two loading sheds. The alley was so tight that even Mercer recoiled, bracing against the fuselage. The Mosquito entered the alley at 382 mph. Wind howled. Metal structures blurred inches from the wingtips. Debris swirled backward in a copper-colored storm. Behind them, one of the pursuing Mosquitoes misjudged the entry and was forced to brake upward, straight into the arc of a flak searchlight that instantly pinned it in a cone of white. Tracer fire chased it like a dragon's breath. But Keane's path remained dark, shadow on shadow, black on black. He burst from the far side of the depot like a bullet leaving a chamber. Mercer looked down at his stopwatch. "We're clear of the city." Keane exhaled, the first real breath he'd taken in minutes. But they weren't safe. Ahead lay open countryside where the Luftwaffe fighters, already diving from altitude, had a final chance to intercept before the Mosquitoes slipped into cloud cover. The real chase was about to begin. 2:19 hours. The open fields east of Cologne. Altitude 150 feet. Speed 385 mph and rising. The Mosquito burst from the city's industrial sprawl and into the pale starlit countryside like a hunted animal breaking free of a flaming cage. Frosted farmland stretched ahead. Dark fields stitched together by hedgerows, barns, and thin rural roads that reflected moonlight like silver veins. Behind them, the city still roared with the echo of explosions, the glow of burning factories, and the blind, frantic gyration of searchlights trying to grab hold of shadows that no longer existed. Mercer checked the stopwatch again, his voice a tight whisper. "Fighters incoming. 90 seconds behind, if the reports are right." "They won't make up that time," Keane muttered. "Not at this altitude, not at this speed." But Mercer wasn't thinking about speed. He was thinking about luck, about home, about the promise he made to his sister before deployment, that he'd come back with stories, not medals. He steadied himself and scanned the radio frequencies. Static crackled. Then, a clipped, tense voice from the second Mosquito. 2 1009s diving, bearing 085. Keane angled the Mosquito slightly, hugging the contour of a shallow valley. The engines bellowed as he pushed them back toward emergency power. Above, faint starlight glimmered off the bellies of the descending German fighters. Lieutenant Karl Voss led the attack. His 109 pitched downward, engine screaming as he pushed the aircraft past structural limits. He knew this was his last chance. The Mosquito was too fast, too low, too slippery for radar. If he didn't catch them now, he never would. He tightened his grip, sweat sliding beneath his oxygen mask. "Hold steady, hold. We have them." But he didn't. From his cockpit, the Mosquito was not a bomber. It was a streak of light, a silver ghost racing across frozen fields with impossible velocity. The 109 dove at 410 mph, dangerously near compressibility. Voss felt the sticks stiffen, the airframe tremble. The next correction might rip the wings off. But he steadied himself and pulled the sight reticle onto where the Mosquito should have been. But it wasn't there. because Keane was already doing something no bomber pilot was supposed to do. He was dropping even lower. "Hang on," Keane barked. He shoved the yoke forward. The Mosquito descended to less than 20 feet, skimming the frost-dusted grass so close that the propeller wash kicked up a shimmering mist behind them. Hedgerows flashed past like black, serrated blades. The aircraft's shadow fused with the ground until it became indistinguishable, one dark smear racing beneath the stars. Mercer clutched his straps, eyes wide. "At this height, we hit a fence post, and we won't hit one." "How do you know?" Keane didn't answer. He felt the terrain, the subtle dips, the faint shadows, the softness of the fields. Instinct and training fused into a terrifying clarity. Every nerve, every muscle tuned to the aircraft's breathing. Above them, Voss tried to follow. He pushed the nose down, down, down. But his 109 couldn't survive that descent at those speeds, not without tearing itself apart. He pulled back, cursing, watching the Mosquito flatten into the valley like a phantom. "We're losing them," one of his wingmen shouted. "We already lost them," Voss whispered. Because at that exact moment, the Mosquito made its final escape move. Keane spotted a thin band of low-hanging river fog, barely visible, stretching across the floodplain. He angled toward it, engines screaming, the Mosquito knifing forward at 388 mph. Mercer blinked. "You're not going into that." "We are." The Mosquito dove into the fog band, swallowed instantly by white mist. The world vanished. No horizon, no ground, no stars, just swirling darkness and shaking air. Keane flew blind for 3 full seconds, then 4, then 5, until they emerged into the open night, the sky clear, the fields stretching peacefully beneath them. The fog bank now a glowing wall behind them. The German fighters burst through moments later, too high, too slow, and pointed in the wrong direction. By the time they corrected, the Mosquito was gone. A dot, a memory, a ghost streaking toward Allied lines. Mercer finally exhaled. "Time." Keane checked the clock. Fighters arrived 90 seconds behind. Mercer shook his head. "That's impossible." "No," Keane said quietly. "That's the Mosquito." Hours later, back at base, as the ground crew inspected the wing punctures and soot burns, a signal came through Allied intelligence. German controllers reported failure to intercept. Enemy fighters reached Cologne's airspace exactly 90 seconds after Mosquito departure. Operators expressed disbelief. Some refused to file the report. The legend grew from that night onward. Luftwaffe pilots no longer laughed at the Mosquito. They feared it, respected it, hunted it, yet rarely caught it. For to chase a Mosquito B MiG-9 at rooftop level over Germany was to chase a ghost with engines, a ghost that outran fighters, a ghost that bent radar, a ghost made of wood and speed and the unbreakable nerve of the men who flew it.